very thrilled again to welcome you to this series of lectures on the thematic of human rights and media tracking. I think that the more we proceed in our lectures, the more enlightened we feel. And I think that so far we have covered so many issues, of course, that concern human rights, media tracking, and today we are going to plunge the depth of another issue, which is all the time related to human rights, but this time it is linked to civil society. So we are going to see to what extent civil society influences human rights and what is the relationship between human rights and civil society. So, of course, in this lecture, we're going to tackle two key words or key concepts. It's the first one is civil society, and the second one human rights. So, I think that we have covered human rights maybe before yesterday. So, in the first lecture, but today it's something new because we are going to tackle the connection between human rights and civil society, which I do believe is very foundational. Why? Because civil society, of course, groups, they play a very pivotal role in advocating, in protecting, and promoting human rights. And this is something which is very, very important that we are going to delve into it. Civil organizations, for example, including non-government organizations, community groups, advocacy organizations, all of them, they work to hold governments accountable for upholding human rights standards, for raising people's awareness, and at the same time for empowering individuals to claim their rights. And this is something very important in this relationship or in this link between civil society and human rights. So civil society, of course, aims to foster public engagement. It aims also to contribute to a culture of accountability, to ensure that rights are respected and that vulnerable populations, of course, receive protection. So this collaboration between civil society and, of course, human rights concepts, this collaboration, it strengthens democratic governance and it promotes social justice and equality. So this is just grosso modo how we highlight or how we are going to highlight today this connection between civil society and human rights, because it does matter to know what is the role of civil society in protecting and advocating for human rights in our communities. So therefore, in the light of this link between civil society and human rights, we're going to attempt to reach these objectives. So the first one is to define and understand civil society in the first instance. So this is the first question that we are going, of course, to answer. What do we mean by civil society as a concept, and of course as a work also, because civil society is a work. So we are going to explain the concept of this civil society, and at the same time we are going to plan the depth of its importance in a democratic context. We are going to discuss the role of civil society organizations, for example, advocating for human rights. The second objective, as you see, it's explore the link between civil society and human rights, and this is something which I do believe it's very important. We're going to examine how civil society contributes to the promotion, protection, and at the same time enforcement of human rights. This is something also very crucial that we are going to explore in this lecture. The third objective is to analyze the challenge faced by civil society. We are going to discuss some obstacles that civil society organizations, for example, encounter and face, including like political repression, lack of resources, and so on and so forth. And at the end, we are going to provide an evaluation and assessment. We are going to evaluate some case studies, and we are going to see some international and national or local examples. We are going to review case studies where civil society, for example, movements effectively brought about human rights advancements. And this is something which I do believe very important, and we are going to deal with this in this lecture. So as I have said, we're going to explore the concept of civil society. So civil society, what's in a name? What do we mean by civil society in the first instance? And how civil society is defined by many specialists, many scholars all over the world. So according to John Kayen, and he is a very specialist, of course, in civil society tracking. So he and the book, you will find his book, from which, of course, or on which I have based the lecture at the end in the references. According to John Kayen, civil society, it means the realm of social life, market changes, charitable groups, clubs, associations, and voluntary agencies that is institutionally distinct from government, families, and private businesses. So this civil society is characterized, of course, by voluntary associations that serves, of course, or that serve to as a critical arena for fostering democratic practices, for example, and holding the whole government accountable. So this is according to John Kayen. Another scholar, of course, who is very specialist in civil society working and civil activism. So there is also Mary Calder. Later on, you can access, for example, her book. It's a very wonderful, very crucial book. It's very outstanding if you would like to get deeper into this question of civil society. So according to Mary Calder, so she defines civil society as such. It's a global process of social transformation. Sorry. So she described it as a platform where individuals, for example, where groups pursue shared interests in the same community, where also this group processes influence political agendas beyond national boundaries, as we are going to see the slogan of the 68th edition of the United Nations Conference on Civil Society, that we are all people, and we have global problems, so we should have global solutions. So this is the meaning of or the significance of this quotation by Mary Calder. So in general, so we can, for example, define civil society as a sphere of social activity undertaken by individuals and organizations, as you see here, non-government organizations, charities, advocacy groups, civil organizations, labor unions. So this is exactly what we mean by what we mean by civil society. So it includes everything that is not governmental, everything that is not related to the state. And of course, this development of civil society, especially, it took like prosperity in the 20th and the 21st century, alongside, of course, human rights globally. And the role of these, for example, the role of this civil society, for example, it serves as a third sector in our society. So it's a third sector. Why? Because it is, like we call it, also civil activism. So it influences social norms, for example, it advocates for marginalized communities, marginalized voices, vulnerable peoples, for example, in our communities. And at the same time, it does something which is very important, is that it promotes transparency and accountability. So transparency is something very important in the work of civil society, and especially in the work of non-government organizations. Well, so again, so let's see civil society and human rights. So what's link, what intersection, how they are intertwined, for example, how they are overlapped, how they are amalgamated. So we are going to see civil society and human rights. So the role of civil society, for example, and its relationship to human rights is that The first thing is that it aims to promote human rights, and this is something very important. We're going to see very pertinent examples of national and international organizations that of course serve within this very global purpose. So promoting human rights, it means that civil society organizations often act as I have said, even or as I said before, as a watchdog, monitoring governments and corporations to ensure that they adhere to human rights standards, to human rights agenda. So this is also a very important role. Also, we can talk about another role of civil society. It has an educational role. What does it mean? It means that many, like non-government organizations, for example, so they aim to raise awareness about human rights, educating the public on their rights and mechanisms for protection. So this is also something that we can deduce from the educational role of civil society. The policy influence also. Through lobbying advocacy, civil society shapes policies sometimes and legislations related to human rights. So sometimes even it can formulate like reforms, it can influence policies, it can influence also political strategies of our communities. It can also monitor, it can also report on human rights abuses. So there is also this role, it's monitoring and reporting. Civil society and human rights often document and report abuses like children rights abuses, marginalized people abuses, providing critical data that international human rights bodies rely on. So this is of course this is the role where we can follow and deduce the role of civil society in relationship to human rights, because civil society really it monitors, it protects, and it is like a watch, it plays the role of a watchdog. It influences our policies, our strategies, our reforms also, for the sake of what? For the sake of promoting human rights, for the sake of giving voice to marginalized people, to the most maybe vulnerable segments of our society. And this is something very important. And of course, this civil society, it plays this role via the work of many non-governmental organizations, for example, via many civil social groups, via charities, for example, and via many of course, non-government associations. But of course, in order, anytime, for example, an organization would like to perform its job well, or would like to set up its agenda or its reform well, of course, it faces many challenges. So we are going to see the challenges that civil society, for example, may face. So as you see here, political repression. So this is unfortunately sometimes that may civil society face, like in authoritarian regimes, for example. So this civil society often face, of course, or it faces restrictions on its activities, with leaders subjected to harassment, imprisonment, or sometimes even worse. So you see, so thinking about this question of civil society, it does matter, of course, to know that it faces many challenges while performing, of course, its role. At the same time, there is this challenge, funding limitations. So of course, we do appreciate the ardent will of non-government organizations, for example, to set up change, to hope for a better world, to hope for a better place when we can enjoy our life, of course, with peace and healthcare and welfare. But of course, all the time, for those non-government organization and even civil society, it faces funding limitations. Although there is a lot of effort indeed, okay, to fund those organizations. Sometimes we find even global like funding, local funding, of course, from the ministries, and as soon as so forth. Well, so this funding limitation, unfortunately speaking, it means limited resources that can hinder, of course, the operation and the work capacity of these organizations, and sometimes they even make them challenging. Okay, it's really a challenge to them because sometimes it's an obstacle, and they sometimes even those organizations or this civil society cannot sustain human rights work well, okay, because of this funding limitations. um, Another challenge also is legal restrictions. Sometimes even countries impose very strict regulations that limit like foreign funding, sometimes operational scope, sometimes even public advocacy. And this is something also, it's like a burden, and sometimes these obstacles and handicaps, of course, the work of this civil society, because legal restrictions, this is something that our community should work on to facilitate all the administrative processes. It's like sometimes when like stakeholders and when social groups or even individuals, when they would like to build or to establish a non-government organization, so sometimes they find many administrative procedures even within their communities and within their nations, let alone abroad, and let alone other challenges like political oppression, funding limitations. But just this legal restrictions, this is something very it's really an issue, okay, that civil society suffers from in of course in its local community. Sometimes they face the public trust. Why public trust is a challenge? Because of, in this digital era, in this technological era, when you have a very diverse platforms of social media, for example, or of media in general. So there is this problem of misinformation, this problem of disinformation sometimes, that can like undermine trust in civil society, diminishing their capacities to mobilize public opinion on human rights issues. This is also another issue. It's the public trust. So sometimes, therefore, I think in the lecture of media tracking, so we have tackled this issue before, and we said that media, of course, this is where media should intervene. Okay, media can help, for example, building that public trust, okay, by avoiding, by removing, by obliterating that misinformation, for example, by removing fake news, for example. So this is here the role of media also can intervene. We can here it's like we can add even the role of media, so it can be also like civil society, human rights, and media, because those organizations, as we saw even yesterday with development journalism, those organizations cannot perform their role as they should be without, of course, this without the role of media beside them. So media also should reinforce and should consolidate the work of this civil society or organization. And this is something very important. We can even talk about it later on, because the role of media is very important these days, especially talking about the sort of development journalism. So we saw yesterday many examples of how development journalism, of course, works with and hand in hand with many non-government organizations. And this is the role of development journalism, is to rectify, sometimes to correct the fake news, sometimes to rethink, okay, the misinformation, and to show people the truth. Okay, this is something very important, and this is here lies, of course, the major and the core role of media. In addition, of course, or working hand in hand with civil society. Yes. So here we are going to talk about civil society and human rights watch future. I don't want to just disappoint you with these challenges. Of course, anytime we have something very beautiful, we do face challenges. So this is maybe this is life, okay, and this is how we should adapt with our life. But still we aspire, okay, to have a very bright future, the future, sorry, and a very prosperous future. So this is our aspiration, and I think that with civil society, with the work of civil society, and this question of human rights, so we can build a very prosperous world where we can enjoy peace, healthcare, and welfare. Well, so in order to be very hopeful and very optimistic, so of course we should question our civil societies in the whole globe, okay, all over the world. What future? What can we, for example, do in order to promote, even we as people, what can we do in order to promote the work of our civil society? So the first thing is that, and these are just some suggestions. You can add others maybe. So we can seek civil society or talk about future by managing to use, okay, digital transformation. So this growing indeed the importance of digital tools, for example, and platforms. This of course will enable civil society actors to circumvent traditional barriers and reach global audience. So this is also something that we can use, and we can, for example, rely on digital transformation. So in this digital world, we can also talk about maybe the positive side of digital era. Of course, we know that there is a black side of the digital era, but there is also this positive side. So we should be very positive. We should be very hopeful and optimistic people. Okay, to just seek what is best in all conditions. Well, there is also this question of interconnectedness. Okay, so interconnectedness is something very important, especially when we talk about a globalized era where the internet allows civil society to operate beyond borders, to collaborate internationally. So this and to attain, of course, global global goals, and at the same time to raise global problems. As I have said, that was I'm going to get back to this issue of global problems, global solutions, because sometimes, though we have many particularities, many cultural particularities, many cultural contexts, but still we do face sometimes global problems, and we should seek global solutions. Well, so interconnected. This is something very important, and globalization. Nowadays, it plays a very pivotal role in connecting people, and I think that this GAIN program, for example, is also a very good opportunity that connects professors, that connects students, okay, all over the world, and that seek, of course, to mobilize students, to mobilize professors, okay, to exchange ideas, to share ideas, and to know about each other's problems, and to suggest maybe global solutions to our problems. So this GAIN program also is also a very nice opportunity to all of us. There is also this question of resilience. This is resilience in adversity. So I think that strategies, for example, employed by civil society to adapt to shrinking civic spaces, for example, such as forming coalition. This is also something very, very important. Sometimes even like legal innovations also, sometimes using safe digital channels for advocacy, so in order to reach this resilience. So this is also something that we can, for example, it's a strategy, like we can use it in order to attain very positive goals. Yes. So So I think this is how we can build civil society. So using those strategies in order to think about the future, because this is something very important to us. So sometimes we blame ourselves. Sometimes even we blame the past. Sometimes we suffer from the present. But it's very good to just maybe aspire for a better future. Okay, so this is something that we can emphasize in this context. Also, talking about future and talking about the present, talking about the challenges that civil society, for example, faces in relationship to the question of human rights. Talking also about like the role of civil society in connection to human rights. So these issues, they are very preponderant. They are very important. But what we should know is that yes, there are challenges, as I have said. We have this vision. We have new visions, for example, towards better future. Yeah, that's fine. But we should, for example, raise some questions. So what does civil society, for example, perform nowadays in order to implement those, for example, theoretical institutions. And this is the thing or the institutional frameworks. So this is the thing that I'm going to show you now, that there have been, of course, many conferences, many symposiums, many books, of course, many intellectual debates, many seminars on the question of the role of civil society and how can we, for example, elevate civil society's work. How can civil society, for example, how can we like help our civil society to perform its role in a very healthy, safe, stable atmosphere in our communities. So I will refer you here to the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. So this is the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. It was really a wonderful conference. It held in Salt Lake City in Utah in the United States in August 2019. And its thematic was, of course, focused on building inclusive and sustainable cities and communities. It was really a very important, very outstanding conference, because we are in dire need of such conferences in order to question and interrogate to what extent civil society, for example, is performing its role, or what does civil society, for example, need in order to perform its role. So this conference or that conference brought together civil society leaders, for example, non-government organizations, educators, youth, also women, and so on and so forth, global citizens. Why they were there? In order, they had one purpose, is to promote sustainable development goal. So that was, of course, the aim. They aim also to make cities, communities very inclusive, also very safe, very resilient, very sustainable. So that was the aim of this conference. As I have said, it was a very important conference. It also it had very important results, because it tackled also the question of climate change, the question of women and or of women's issues also. And it underscored also civil society's essential role in advocating for inclusive policies, and at the same time mobilizing for environmental and social equity and social issues on a global scale. So that was really a very important conference, because sometimes we talk about civil society, but we should question what we are doing in order to promote that civil society, because even we are people, so stakeholders, for example, intellectuals, professors, members of the society, so we should do something and we should help this civil society in order what, in order to just get beyond, or to go beyond, okay, those challenges that it faces in performing, of course, performing its role, okay, to promoting human rights. So this conference, as I have said, it was really a very important step. It was really a very important conference that really mobilized global, that mobilized people to take into consideration this issue of civil society and its relationship to human rights. There is also another, this is international. So you see, this conference, of course, was international at the level of the United Nations, and it took place in the United States of America. But at the national level also, so our communities also, they are working. So, and they are following the trend of the United Nations. And in many countries all over the world, of course, many conferences, of course, were held in order to tackle this issue of civil society and human rights. I'm going to provide you with another local example. It's from my country, Morocco, from the Kingdom of Morocco. So this is the 13th International Conference of National Human Rights Institutions. It was held in Marrakesh, in Marrakech city, where I teach. Okay, so from October the 10th to 12th in 2018. And really, it had this very important thematic, as you see here, expanding the civic space and protecting human rights defenders with a specific focus on women. The role of national human rights institutions. So this is a very wonderful, very relevant, and very suitable topic, of course, that this conference took into consideration. It was a significant event, really, by all means. Why? Because it focused on enhancing civic spaces, enhancing the work of civil societies, enhancing the work of stakeholders, of non-government organizations, and at the same time advancing the protection of human rights defenders. And this, by the way, this conference, it was hosted by the National Council of Human Rights, the Moroccan National Human Rights Council, and at the same time by the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, in addition to the United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. So you see, so those are the three pillars that, of course, funded and that hosted that conference. And of course, that conference, it was really a landmark event. Why? Because it brought again together, it connected people together from many countries. It brought representatives of human rights globally, representatives of civil society, for example, organizations, and at the same time it brought human rights experts from all over the world. And this is something, again, we talked about interconnectedness. So here lies interconnectedness. So you see, this is how civil society works. So as I have said, this is the central theme. So it highlighted very many themes, but the major one, it was about like the crucial role of this national human rights institutions. So they had questioned the role of national human rights institutions. At the same time, they had highlighted fostering inclusive and how they can protect also the environment. So this is also something which was in their agenda. Especially that they tackled the question of gender specific threats. So that was also, you see that with a focus very specific focus on women's studies. So that was, of course, their focus. So of course they, among many others, but gender specific traits. So it was also in their agenda. So grosso modo, this of course, such conferences, of course, they aim to enhance cooperation with regional, global, international, of course, stakeholders, and at the same time to create like regional networks, and at the same time to address those challenges. So this is also, it is something that is very very important. So you may see also the slogan: education, assembly, of course, freedom, opinion, liberty, health, equality, rights. So you see, so that was also among the issues that were tackled, okay, in that conference that was held in Marrakesh in 2018. So what I would like to of course show you here or elucidate is that when we talk about civil society, so we should act, we should do something. We have been talking a lot about how to render theory into practice, how to render our human rights, okay, how to just remove them from the papers into and put them into our reality. Let's take it as such, okay. So this is how we can render our human rights a reality that we can all enjoy. So you see, such conferences like the international, either at the level of at the global level or even at the national level, for example. So all of them, so they work for one purpose, is for, of course, protecting and monitoring, and at the same time advocating for human rights all over the world. Um I'm going also to shed more light on this question of civil society by providing you with some very pertinent, like, non-government organizations, and maybe in the lecture of this afternoon. So we are going to deal with non-government organizations per se, and we are going to see in details the role of non-government organization, how they work, how they promote, of course, human rights all over the world, and how they work nationally and internationally. Well, so I suggest to you these these examples. Of course, all the time I opt for international examples and local examples. So. Um, so let's see Amnesty International. This is at the level of this is a global, of course, institution or organization, and this organization, it is a very important one because it documents human rights abuses. Okay, so this is, and at the same time it follows, of course, the policy agenda. Okay, so this is something very crucial that this organization, for example, does. At the same time, this Amnesty International, we can also consider it as another influential civil society organization. It is dedicated, of course, to defending and promoting human rights again, but this time is worldwide. It's globally. It tackles human rights, but from a global perspective, from a global dimension. It was founded in 1961, and it works, of course, independently from the government and private interests. Why? Because its aim is to publicize human rights issues, to investigate also human rights issues. Sometimes even it tackles human rights abuses, children rights abuses, women rights abuse. Also, it campaigns sometimes for justice. It supports sometimes victims of repression and violence. So this Amnesty International really it exemplifies, of course, the core functions of civil society. So this is a very pertinent example of how civil society works. And at the same time, even this Amnesty International, so it advocates, of course, for human rights, but at the same time, it writes reports sometimes also. It raises global awareness at the global level. Sometimes it provides the information needed for the government at the global level. Sometimes also it works with international like bodies to respond to human rights abuses. So it is like a watch, it performs like a watchdog role, which is of course very essential to civil society. So and this is something very, very crucial that this Amnesty International okay does, and it is a very famous international, very famous non-government organization. Another international example that of course elucidates to what extent civil society is working globally and nationally, so or locally. So this is also another. It's Human Rights Watch. This is another example that elucidates and clarifies to what extent those international not government organizations, to what extent they work, they perform the role of promoting, of course, human rights. So this is an independent, of course, organization. It conducts also independent investigations to document human rights against abuses. Sometimes those human rights abuses they include violations of freedom of speech. Sometimes arbitrarily like detention. Sometimes torture, discrimination, racial discrimination, for example. And it does the same thing, almost the same thing as Amnesty International, because it publishes annual reports. It publishes sometimes regional reports to expose those abuses. And sometimes even it brings global attention to human rights issues. This is also a very important organization. Why? Because it operates independently of states, and it also controls and it keeps a watch on the transparency of democracy. So this is also something very important. So it detects to what extent the values of transparency and democracy, to what extent they take place, to what extent they are implemented. So this is one of the major role of this organization. So it also mobilizes individuals, communities all over the globe, sometimes even organizations to take action, because we have talked about action, so this is it. So it mobilizes people to take action all over the world, so it means at the global level. So this is at the international level. There are also like other we see other local examples. So as I have said, sometimes we find this collaboration between global organizations, international organizations, or global civil society and local civil society. And this is something which is very good if we would like, of course, to promote human rights and to foster, of course, human development. So this is the National Council of Human Rights, and this is a local example from. Yes, so this is a local example. This is the Moroccan Association of. Sorry, so I think I skipped something. Yes, so let's talk about. Let's talk about first of all the National Council of Human Rights. So this is again an independent institution tasked with promoting and protecting human rights in Morocco, in the Kingdom of Morocco. Like global organizations, for example, so this this organization also, or this local civil society organization also conducts investigations into human rights abuses. It provides at the same time, not just it detects human rights abuses, but it provides at the same time recommendations. And this is what is good about this civil society organization: recommendations to the government, and it raises awareness about human rights among, of course, among the public. So this is also a very crucial initiative that is, of course, advanced by the Moroccan Kingdom. So this also shows to what extent Moroccan Kingdom is within the strategy of building, of course, civil society. So this council plays a significant role indeed in addressing issues like gender-based violence, for example, also minority rights, children's rights, also the rights of peoples with the rights of people with disabilities. It also advocates for legal reforms, for example, such as revisions of the law, revisions of the family law code, for example, like the Mudawana, what we call the Mudawana in Morocco. And this is something. This is a very significant, of course, civil society. Again, it is a civil and independent organization. So it is within civil society, local organizations that of course among many civil organizations in Morocco. Let's see another local example, and this is women-based civil society. Let's call it like this. It's the Moroccan associations also of human rights. This is also all the time about human rights, stressing also women's rights, and this is the oldest and largest human rights organization in Morocco. It focuses as the National Council of Human Rights on defending civil, political rights, economic, social rights, defending also the rights of women, defending the rights of minorities, the rights of children. It also, like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch, it also conducts, and this is something very seminal, it conducts reports also. So it conducts reports on human rights conditions in Morocco, and sometimes even it advocates for legislative reforms. So this is of course her. This is the task of this organization, and this is its major role. So it addresses also issues such as like prison conditions, sometimes freedom of expression, freedom of speech, sometimes police abuses, and many others. So like international organizations, this civil society organization, or what we call civil society, local civil society organization, this also plays also the role of a watchdog organization that holds the government accountable. So I think that this is a very pertinent example again that shows or that highlights the work of civil society, especially the work of civil society and government organizations. So as I have said, when we talk each time we talk, for example, about civil society, so it is very linked to promoting human rights. So you see now, I think that now the link between civil society and human rights, so it's very palpable and it's very tangible to you. It's very clear. So we can sometimes we cannot separate the work of civil society from human rights, because we cannot render human rights into action without we cannot reach that very noble aim and noble goal without, of course, mobilizing civil society, okay, stakeholders, without mobilizing civil society organizations. So this is, I do believe, this is something that we the people, for example, of our communities, with the population of our communities. So we should, of course, work together again collectively in order to set up that change that we would like it to be in our reality. Of course, it's a better change. Well, so So I think this is grosso modo about our lecture today. So we have tackled this issue of civil society and human rights, and we're going to maybe delve deeply into the work of the non-government organizations, and we're going to see the role of non-government organizations this afternoon in the following lecture later on. In order, but we are going to work like within the same context and within the same framework. In this lecture, we have seen what is civil society as a concept, for example, the challenges, the role, what future. But in this afternoon, we are going to dig into the work of non-government organizations, either, for example, globally speaking or nationally or locally speaking. Well, so to conclude, so I would like to conclude with this quotation. Uh, as a civil society, our task is to pressure governments into democratic changes. So this is maybe it's a rule that summarizes everything that I have said in this lecture. So we are all civil society members. So we should work together in order, of course, to pressure our governments into democratic changes, into better changes. So this is how we can seek the contributions of civil society. They are very essential for creating, again, a sustainable future. By fostering and engaged, informed, and active citizens, for example, wherever they are, so civil society organizations, of course, can drive, or we can drive them to momentum, for example, goals in order to meet our sustainable development goals. So this is our aim, in order to establish a democratic state, in order to establish democratic changes in our communities. So we should work hand in hand to make our communities more resilient, more just, more capable of achieving long-term prosperity. Well, so see you in the afternoon in the other lecture later on. Thank you very much.